Okay, greetings one and all, and welcome to this math video. In this math video, we will be considering paper 3, yes, paper 3 of a Bgcse mathematics pass examination. And so let's dive into the questions. Question number 1, it says, for the angle beta, sine beta equals 0. Give two possible values for beta in the range 0 degrees is less than or equal to beta is, and beta is less than or equal to 360. So basically what they're asking us to do is they want us to solve this trigonometric equation such that whatever value we find for beta, that's once we put it into sine, it's going to cause that sine function to be equal to 0. So we have to find what value of beta that we could put into the sine function that's going to give us 0. And that beta value, it must be between 0 and 360 degrees. So this beta value must be between 0 and 360. It could be equal to 0 and it could be equal to 360, and it can also be between them. So we have defined two possible values in which when we put that beta value into the sine function, the result is 0. And so for this trig equation, we have sine beta equals 0. What we could do is we could take the sine inverse of both sides. So we basically doing the opposite of sine, taking its inverse. So we take the sine inverse of this side and the sine inverse of this side. And so what happens is the sine inverse and the sine is going to cancel out each other. So this and this cancel out, leaving us with just beta. So beta is equal to sine inverse of 0. And what is sine inverse of 0? Well, sine inverse of 0 is just 0. And so what that means is the beta value that solve this equation is 0. That's one of them. So that means if I do sine of 0, sine of 0 is definitely 0. So we found one beta value that solves this equation. And this beta value is definitely in the range because it's between 0 and 360. And then we know that 0 can be included and 360 can be included. And so beta equals 0 is definitely a value that we could use because in the range, they tell us that 0 can be included in that range. So what that means is that if I put 0 into the sine function, we know that sine of 0 is going to give us 0. And so this beta value definitely works. Now we need to find the other beta value that makes this equation true, the other beta value such that when we put that beta value into the sine function, we get 0. So we know that one value of beta that satisfies the given equation is 0, like we saw over here. To find the other solution to the given equation, we use the useful trigonometric identity below. So in order to find the next beta value that will work, we use this trig identity. Okay, so we have to use this formula to help us. So what this formula says is that sine of 180 minus a given angle, is going to be equal to sine of that angle. So let's use that trig identity. So again, sine of 180 minus an angle is going to be equal to sine of that angle, and that's true, okay? This is a true equation. So since we know that this is true, we already know that we could use 0. So let's use 0. So what this equation is saying is that sine of 180 minus 0, because we could use 0, that is an angle. So a could be an angle. So sine of 180 minus 0 is going to be equal to sine of 0. And this is true as well because a is just 0. So when we put a here, once we set a equal to 0, we have to also put 0 here as well. So all we did was we substitute a for 0. And so what it's saying is that sine of 180 degrees, because 180 minus 0 is just 180. So this is telling us that sine of 180 equals to sine of 0. Now, what is sine of 0? If you put it in your calculator, if you put sine of 0 in your calculator, you get that sine of 0 is 0. So what that means is that sine of 180 degrees is 0. And so that means that the other beta value that we could use is 180 degrees. So what do we know so far? Based on this one, we know that sine of 0 is 0. So that's one beta value that satisfies this equation. And the other one that we know is that sine of 180 degrees equals 0. And so we found two angles that once we put it into So we found two angles that once we put it into our sine function, it gives us the result of 0. And that's what we were looking for. And these two values are within our range because 180 degrees is between 0 and 360, and 0 is definitely in this range as well. So the two beta values that satisfy this equation, so beta equals 0 and beta equals 180. They are the two possible values for which they are the two possible values for beta in the range 0 to 108, in the range 0 to 360. Bear in mind that we include 0 and 360, for which sine of beta equals to 0. So what is this saying? It is saying that we found two values for beta such that once we put that value into our sine function, we get 0. Those two values are 0 and 180 degrees. So once we put sine of 0, that's going to give us 0. And once we put sine of 180 degrees, that gives us 0. And this is how we found those two values. Let's move on to the next question. Here we have number 2. It says that the coordinates of 2 points on the straight line are 6, 5 and negative 3, 5. Now they want us to find the slope. In order to find the slope, we use the equation y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now, if we look at our coordinates, we know that this value right here, this is x1, and this value right here, that is x2, okay? And then this one is y1, and then this value right here is y2. So x1 is 6, x2 is negative 3, y1 is 5, y2 is 5. So let's plug our values into our equation. So we know that y2 is 5 and y1 is 5. And we know that x2 is negative 3 and x1 is 6. So it's going to be 5 minus 5 divided by negative 3 minus 6. What is 5 minus 5? 5 minus 5 is 0. And negative 3 minus 6 is going to be negative 9. And if we divide 0 by negative 9, the answer is 0. So that means that our slope is 0. Now, once we have a slope that is 0, what that means is that we have a horizontal line. And so the orientation of this line is this. This is a horizontal line which passes through 5 on the y-axis. So this is the line that we have. So it is a horizontal line that passes through 5 on the y-axis. And we know it passes through 5 because if you look at our coordinates, so both of our y coordinates are on 5. And so this is the orientation of the line. It's a horizontal line and it passes through 5 on the y-axis. And this is the line right here, the line y equals to 5, which has a slope of 0. And it has a slope of 0 because there's no incline. It's just going straight across. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. This is a matrices problem. We have this matrix multiplied by this matrix, and they set that equal to 35, negative 27. And so we have a 2 by 2 matrix multiplied by a 2 by 1. And so if we look carefully, this matrix here, it has 2 rows and it has 2 columns. Okay, so its order is 2 by 1. Okay. No, my bad. Its order is 2 by 2. So it has 2 rows, this row, and it has 2 columns, this column, and this column. So its order is 2 by 2. Let's look at this matrix. This matrix has 2 rows, okay? And this matrix has 1 column. So that's going to be a 2 by 1. So again, this matrix, 2 rows, 2 columns. So it's a 2 by 2 matrix. This matrix right here, it has 2 rows, and it has 1 column. So it's a 2 by 1 matrix. Can we multiply these? Yes, we can multiply them because these two numbers right here are equal. So that means that the number of columns for the first matrix is equal to the number of rows for the second matrix. If that's the case, we know that we can multiply them. And what's also interesting is that our resultant matrix, the matrix that we will get after we multiply them, is going to be a 2 by 1 matrix. Okay, so that's important to note as we multiply these things. So the resultant matrix is going to be a 2 by 1. Okay. Okay, so let's multiply. So we have these two matrices here that we're going to multiply. So we're going to say row 1, okay, multiplied by column 1. So row 1 multiplied by column 1. And so let's multiply. We're going to multiply it term by term. Okay, so let's do it. So the way how we do it is that we say, okay, 0 times A. Okay, 0 times A. And that's what we put it as 0 times A. Then we do 5 times B. Okay, again, 0 times A and then 5 times B. And that's what we have for the first entry. And that's how we get that one. Next, after we do that, we do row 2, column 1. And so we're going to do it term by term. So we're going to do 1 times A. That's how we get the 1 times A here. And we're going to do -1 times B. And that's how we got this here. And we add them. And so let's do that. So we have 0 times A, which is 0. 5 times B, which is 5B. 1 times A, which is A. And -1 times B, which is -B. And we just bring down this matrix and bring down this matrix with the equal sign. Now, what is 0 plus 5B? Well, 0 plus 5B is just going to be 5B. A positive times a negative is going to be a negative. So this is just A minus B. That's why you have this here. And we just bring down this matrix. Now, two matrices are equal. Here we have these two matrices that are equal to each other. These two matrices are equal. Now, by definition, two matrices are equal if and only if corresponding entries are equal. So that means that if these two are equal, that means that this entry and this entry must be equal to each other, okay? So let's use that idea. And so that we're saying that 5B must be equal to 35 if these two matrices are equal by definition. And also this entry right here must be equal to its corresponding entry, which is -27. And so let's put that right there. So now we have these two equations, and we're going to use these two equations to help us to solve for B and for A. Let's use this first equation, 5B equal to 35. If we divide both sides by 5, then cancel that 5, and we're left with B is equal to 35 divided by 5, so B is equal to 7. So using this first equation, we are able to find that B is equal to 7. What about A? Let's use the second equation. Let's send that 7 over the equal sign. It becomes +7, and -27 plus 7 is going to be -20. And so the values of A and B that satisfies this matrix equation is B equals to 7 and A is equal to -20. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have this equation, and we want to solve for x. Like, what is the value of x that satisfies this equation? Okay, so let's begin. So we have 4 times 10 to the third power times 6 times 10x divided by 2.4 times 10 to the -4 equals to 1. What we're going to do is we are going to put the 6 and the 4 by itself, and we're going to put the 10 to the third power and 10 to the x power by itself. So let's do that. So let's organize the numbers that we have. So again, we have 4 times 6. Those are regular numbers, and we have the base 10. So 10 to the power of 3 times 10 to the power of x, we put them together. That's what we did. So we put the 6 over here, and we put the 10 over here. 10 to the third power over here. Now, what is 4 times 6? Well, 4 times 6 is 24 divided by 2.4. Now, what is 10 to the -4 power? And we have 10 to the third power. So if we were to divide them, okay, if we were to divide these two, we're dividing 10 to the third power and 10 to the -4th power. If you are dividing these, they have the same base, so you could divide them. But if you're dividing them, you have to subtract the powers. So we have 10 to the power of 3. It's going to be minus -4. So since they have the same base and we're dividing them, we could subtract the powers. So we have 3 minus -4. And we just keep the 10 to the power of x right there. We set that equal to 1. Moving right along, what is negative times a negative? Well, a negative times a negative is a positive. So we have 3 plus 4. And what is 3 plus 4? Well, 3 plus 4 is 7, so we're left with 10 to the power of 7. We just put times 10 to the power of x here. And 24 divided by 2.4 is just 10. So what we have so far is 10 times 10 to the 7 times 10 to the x. Okay, so let's combine these. What is 10 to the power of 1 times 10 to the power of 7? Well, that's just going to be, we could add the powers because if you're multiplying the same base, so if you have two things that has the same base, you could add the powers if you're multiplying them. So let's run this back. So if you have two things that have the same base and you're dividing them, you can subtract the powers. But if you have two things that have the same base and you're multiplying them, you add the powers. So this is 10 to the power of 1 times 10 to the power of 7. So we add the powers. It's going to be 10 to the power of 1 plus 7. What is 1 plus 7? That's going to be 10 to the power of 8 times 10 to the power of x equals to 1. Now, we're still trying to solve for x. So let's get rid of this 10 to the power of 8. Let's put that on this side. We could do that by dividing both sides by 10 to the power of 8. We cancel the 10 to the power of 8 on this side. So we're left with 10 to the power of x is equal to 10 to the power. So we have 10 to the power of x is equal to 1 divided by 10 to the power of 8. We can rewrite this 1 to the power. We can rewrite 1 divided by 10 to the power of 8 as 10 to the power of negative 8, like they mean the same thing. So 1 divided by 10 to the power of 8 can be written as 10 to the power of negative 8. Now, what do we do next? We know that if you have the same base, okay, and you have an equation where you have the same base, so these two have the same base, 10 and 10. If they're the same base, then the powers are equal. Okay, so if they have the same base, the rule is if they have the same base, then the powers are equal. So that means that x is going to be equal to negative 8. So the value of x that satisfies this equation is negative 8. Okay, let's move on to question number 5 here. It says the savings bank issues term deposits earning interest at the rate of 5% compounded semi-annually. Okay, calculate the value of a $6,000 term deposit maturing at the end of 1 year. Okay, so let's consider this formula. This is not simple interest. This is interest where we compound it semi-annually. So we have to use this formula. A is equal to P, open bracket, 1 plus x to the power alt raised to the power of n. What is A? A is the amount that you're going to get at the end. Okay. What is P? P is the principal or the starting amount. And in this case, P is going to be 6,000. That's the principal. Okay. Now what is X? Well, X is the interest you get in one compounding period. And so that's going to be what, 5%? But remember, it's semi-annually, so we have to divide by 2. And so 5% divided by 2 is going to be 0.025. That's the interest you get in one compounding period. Now let's move on to N. N is the number of compounded periods. The number of compounded periods, remember, it's going to be semi-annually. So it's going to be twice in 1 year, because only 1 year that we have. And it's going to be twice in that year. So it's going to be, N is going to be equal to 2. Okay. And so since we have all our values together, let's actually calculate it. P is equal to 6,000, X is equal to 0.025, and N is equal to 2. Let's put that in our equation. Substitute 6,000, open bracket, 1 plus 0.025, all the raised to the power of 2. We know that 1 plus 0.025 is 1.025. We still have to square that. So put in your calculator 1.025 all raised to the power of 2. And you will get 1.050625 because we square it. So we multiply it by itself. Now we're going to multiply 6,000 by this entity, 1.050625, to give us $6,303.75. And so that means that what's going to happen is that at the end of 1 year, this is the amount that the person is going to have, $6,303.75 as compared to $6,000. So once they put it in the deposit and they leave it, and the interest add up under it, the total now is going to be more than they previously had. So it's going to be $6,303 $3.75. Now let's move on to question number 6. It says, for the formula A equals to P plus PRT, find the value of R when A is 1,290, P is 750, and T is equal to 8. So they want us to find the value of R. So here we still have this equation. We know that A is equal to 1,290, so let's substitute that. We know that P is equal to 750. We know that P is equal to 750, and we know that T is equal to 8, so we substitute our values in. Now let's multiply. What is 750 times 8? 750 times 8 is going to be 6,000. Remember, our goal is still to find the value of R. So let's send the 750 over the equal sign. It was positive, so when we send it over, it's going to be negative. So it's going to be 1,290 minus 750. We can subtract, so 1,290 minus 750 is going to be $540. We're still trying to find the value of R, so we have to divide both sides. Well, before we divide both sides, let's just switch the equation so that our R is going to be on this side, on the left-hand side. And so now we could divide both sides by 6,000 to find the exact value of R. These two cancel, so R is going to be equal to 540 divided by 6,000. And so R is going to be equal to 0.09. So when A is 1,290, P is 750, and T is equal to 8, the value of R is going to be 0.09. Let's move on to question B. It says, for the formula A equals to P plus PRT, A equals to P plus PRT, make P the subject of the formula. So we have to make P the subject. So currently A is the subject, but we want P to be the subject. So we want P on one side and everything else on the other side. So what we could do, we know that we have P in this term and we have P in this term, so we could factor out a P, because P times 1 is P, and then P times RT is PRT. So what we did is we factored out a P. Then we could divide both sides by, because remember, we just want P on this side, so we could divide both sides by 1 plus RT. So we divide both sides by 1 plus RT. We cancel both. We cancel on this side, so we're just left with P is equal to A divided by 1 plus RT. We switch the equation so that P could be on the left-hand side. And so we have that P is equal to A divided by 1 plus RT. And that's our final answer. So P is the subject of this equation now. Now let's move on to this question. This is a cumulative frequency curve, and it shows the scores of 400 candidates in a college placement exam. From the graph, we want to estimate the median mark. So the median mark, in order to find the median mark, what we have to do is we know that there are 400 candidates who took this placement exam. So we're going to divide that by 2. Once we divide that by 2, we know that we get our score, we get our number of 200. So we have to take 200, we have to find the corresponding mark with 200. And so 200 is here, so we're going to go over and come down. And so this is going to be 45%. And so the median mark is going to be 45%, which is in the middle of 40 and 50. Okay, let's move on to question 7B. Here they want us to figure what is the lower quartile. So if you're trying to figure a lower quartile, you're going to take your total and divide it by 4. And 400 divided by 4 is 100. And so we're going to go to 100 on our graph. This is 80, and it's going to be 100 because this is 120 above. So 100 is right there. And if we go over and we come down to find the corresponding score, this is going to be 32%. And so the lower quartile is going to be 32%. Now let's move on to question 7C. Here it says that we want to figure out the number of candidates who scored 40% or more. Okay, so if we look at 40%, right? So this is 40%. And if we go up and we find the corresponding number of people, we find that this is 160. So what this is telling us, and this is very important that you understand what it is telling us, this is telling us that 40%, this is telling us that 160 students, yes, 160 students scored less than 40%. That is what this is telling us. So this is telling us that 160 students, all right, 160 students scored less than 40%. So the number of candidates who scored less than 40% is 160. That is what this is telling us. But what we want is we want a number of students who scored 40% or more. So we know that 160 students scored less than 40%, and we know that there's a total of 400 students. So if we want to figure out the number of students or number of candidates who scored 40% or more, what we're going to do is we're going to take away 160 from 400. And so it's going to be 400 minus 160. That's going to give us 240. So basically what we did is we divided the candidates into two groups. One group is the number of students who scored less than 40%, which we found it to be 160. And one group is the number of students who scored 40% or more, and we found that to be 240. And if we add 240 and 160, we get the total, which is 400. So the answer for this one is 240. Now let's move on to question number 7D. We already did 7C. It says they want to know the pass mark if only 60 candidates were accepted. So what is 400 minus 60? 400 minus 60 is 340. So if 60 candidates were accepted, right, that means 340 was not accepted, okay? So again, if 60 were accepted, that means 340 was not accepted. So 340 right there. Let's go on our graph and let's find 340. 340 should be about here. If we correspond it to our curve and we go down, we have 70%. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that 70% of students, this is telling us that 340 students, right? 340 students achieve less than 70%. So let me repeat that. What this is telling us is that 340 students got less than 70%. And so 340 students scored less than 70%. That's what this is telling us. 340 students scored less than 70%. So if 340 students scored less than 70%, then that means that 60 scored 70% or more. And so that means that the pass mark is going to be 70 because only 60 were accepted. So 60 candidates, in order for you to be a part of that 60, you have to score 70% or more to be able to be a part of the 60. Because if you scored less than 70, then you're going to be a part of the 340 who were not accepted. Okay, let's move on to question number 8. Here we have a vector problem. And it says express in terms of x and y in simplest form AD. We want to figure out like what is the vector AD. So we know that AD, if we want to go from AD, we can go from A to B, right? And then we're going to go from B to D, right? That's how we could get from A to D, all right? So we go A to B and then from B to D, and that's how we could get from A to D because A is our starting point and D is our ending point. So what did we do? Well, we went across this one, so that's x, all right? And then we went across this one, so that's 2x plus 6y. And so let's combine like terms. X plus 2x is 3x. And if we were to factor this out, we pull out the 3. And so we're left with x plus 3, open bracket, x plus 2y. How do we get that? Well, 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 2 is 6, so it's going to be 6y. So AD is going to be equal to 3x plus 6y, which is factored in its factored form, 3 open bracket x plus 2y. Now let's move on to this one here. We want to find BC. So we're going to start at B and end at C. So we start at B and we go to D. That's going to be 2x plus 6y. But we're trying to get to C. So we're going to go up this route. And so we're going in this direction, okay, upward. But this is going to be in the opposite direction because if we look at the arrow is pointed, the arrow is pointed in the opposite direction. So what that means is that in order to find out what is BC, we're going to go here, 2x plus 6y, perfect. But because we're going in the opposite direction of the 2y, it's going to be negative 2y. And so let's simplify. We know that 6y minus 2y is going to be 4y. And so we have 2x plus 4y. That's our answer, but we could write it in factored form. And so 2 times x, we know that's 2x, and 2 times 2 is 4. So BC is equal to 2 times open bracket x plus 2y. Now the next question says, write two geometrical properties of AD and BC. So what is AD? Well, we know that AD is 3 open bracket x plus 2y. And we know that BC is going to be equal to 2 open bracket x plus 2y. So what are the two geometrical properties of AD and BC? So what we can do is we can express AD in terms of BC. And let's do that. So this right here is AD. But what if we do this? If we multiply 3 over 2 by 2 open bracket x plus 2y, what's going to happen is this 2 and this 2 is going to cancel out, and we're going to be left with 3x plus 2y. So basically, AD can be written as 3 over 2, 2x, 2 open bracket x plus 2y. So basically what I'm saying here is that I can write AD as 3 over 2, open bracket, 2 open bracket x plus 2y. Like I could write AD like this, all right? Now, why would I want to write AD like this? Well, because if you look carefully, this right here in red, that's exactly BC. So I could express AD as 3 over 2 BC, all right? So basically all I did was I expressed AD in terms of BC. And so once we could do that, once we can express one vector in terms of another, once we can take one vector and express it as a scalar multiple of another vector, then we have some nice geometrical properties that apply. That means that these two vectors are parallel because I can take one vector and express it in terms of the other. So one vector is a scalar multiple of the other vector. And so that means that these two vectors are parallel. Okay, that's what it means to be parallel. If we can take one vector and express it as a scalar multiple of the other vector. So what I did here was I took AD, and all I did was I multiplied by 3 over 2, and I found that if I just cancel out these 2's, that's exactly AD. And so what that means is that 3 over 2, that means that this expression right here is exactly AD. But this expression is 3 over 2 BC. And so that means that I can write AD in terms of BC. So since one vector can be written as a scalar multiple of another vector, this means that the following geometrical properties hold. Number one, that automatically means that these two vectors are parallel. That's what it means to be parallel vectors. If you can express one vector as a scalar multiple of the other vector. So that means that the vectors AD and BC are scalar multiples of each other. That also means that the vectors AD and BC have the same direction. And this also means that the vector AD, right, is 3 over 2 times longer than BC. So AD, based on the same equation, is 3 over 2 times longer than BC. So AD is longer. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Here we have a probability question. It says the table below shows the survey results of 200 people and the average number of minutes that they talk on their cell phone each month. So we have the number of people. We have 117 people who talk less than 200 minutes. 35 people talk between 200 and 399 minutes. And 23 people talk 400 to 599 minutes. And 25 people talk 600 or more minutes. And that gives us a total of 200 people. I should say that this 23 means that 23 people talk 400 to 599 minutes. So what they want us to do is calculate the probability that the person talks 600 or more minutes. We know that there are 200 persons in total. So that is going to be the number of elements in the sample space. So here it says let E equals the event that the person selected at random talk 600 or more minutes. That's what we set E equal to. So if you're trying to find the probability of E, which is the probability of the event that we find a person randomly who talks 600 or more minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to take 25, right, which is the number of people who talk 600 or more minutes, and divide it by what? By the total, which is the number of elements in the sample space, which is 200. That's 200 persons who were surveyed. If we divide that, we get 0.125. Now let's move on to the next question. Here we have the event that both persons selected at random talk less than 200 minutes. So the probability of E, which is the probability that both talk less than 200 minutes, is going to be 117 over 200. So this is going to be the first person. So if we look at it, 117 persons talk less than 200 minutes. So this is the first person that we selected. So 117 over 200, that's going to be the probability that the first person selected talked less than 200 minutes. But remember, we selected two people. And so we got to select the next person. And so the next person is going to come out of this 117 persons, but it's no longer 117 because we remember we already selected one person. There's going to be 116 persons now that we can select from. And it's no longer going to be 200 because remember we selected one person already. So it's only going to be 199 persons left that we could choose from. So if we multiply, we get 117 multiplied by 116. That gives us 13,572. And if we multiply 200 by 199, that gives us 39,800. If we divide that, we get 0.34100502251. If we express that to two decimal place, the answer is 0.34. So remember, we select one person from this group, and the probability of selecting that one person is going to be 117 over 200. But then we select another person from the same group of persons who talk less than 117. And so it's going to be, we can't have 117 in all because remember, we already select one person from the 117. So we only have, it's going to be one of the 116 persons that are left. Similarly, we already selected one of the 200. So it's only going to be 199 left. So that's how we get the 116 and 199. We multiply, then we divide. That's how we get our answer. Move right along. Let's move on to question BI. It says calculate the probability. So two people were selected at random. Calculate the probability that one talked 200 to 399 minutes and the other talked 400 to 599 minutes in any order. Okay. So let's say that we selected, so we can let that event be that. Let's say that we selected the number of persons who did 200, the number of persons who, let's say that we selected one person who talked 200 to 399 minutes. Let's say that we selected that person first. So if we selected that person first, that means that it's going to be 35 because it's 35 of them who talk 200 to 399 minutes. And it's going to be out of 200 because there's 200 people to choose from. But now remember, you have to select another person, and that other person is going to come from the 400 to 599 minutes group. And so it's going to be 23 of them that we could select from, any one of the 23. So it's 23 here, but it's not going to be 200 people in all because remember, we already selected one. So it's only going to be 199 people that we could select from. So that's why it's 23 over 99. So this way is if we selected the person who, the person from the who talk 200 to 399 minutes first, and then we selected the other person who talk for 400 and 599 minutes second. But there's another way that we could do it. We could select the person who talked for 499 minutes first, and then we could select the other person who talked 200 to 399 minutes second. So if we select the person who talked for 400 to 599 minutes first, if we do that first, then that means that we have to select 20, or we only could select out of the 23 persons from right here. And it's going to be out of 200 because remember, we selecting from a fresh pool. But then we're going to select another person, and that person is going to be from the persons who talked 200 to 399 minutes. And so it's going to be a fresh 35, but it's only going to be 199 people that we could choose from. So this one is if we selected the person who talked 200 to 399 minutes first. Then we select the person who talked for 400 to 599 minutes second. And this way is if we select the number of persons who talked, if we select one person who talked 400 to 599 minutes first, and then the other person who talked for 200 to 399 minutes second. So this is the two orders that it happen. Okay. So now let's multiply 35 times 23 is 805. And 23 times 35 is again 805. 200 times 199 is 39,800. And again, 200 times 199 is 39,800. We add them, we get 1,610 divided by 39,800. When we divide them, we get this long decimal, but if we round to two decimal places, we get 0.04. And so 0.04 is the correct answer for this one. Okay, let's move on to number 10. Now for number 10, we have this diagram and they want us to figure out the length of BC. So they want us to figure out this length right there, the length of BC, okay? Now for this one, we're gonna use the cosine rule. And so let's use the cosine rule. For the cosine rule, we're gonna label our triangle. This is gonna be A. A is gonna be the missing side. We're gonna call this one is gonna be our angle. So the missing side always is corresponding to let me say that the correct way. So A is the missing side. Small a is the missing side. That's what we're trying to find, BC. And capital A is going to be the angle that corresponds with the missing side. So that's how you say it. So again, we're trying to find BC, that is small a. That's what we're trying to find. And capital A is going to be the angle that corresponds with the missing side, which is in this case 62.5. We're going to call this side B, which is 125. We're going to call this side C. So let's put all our values together. We do not know what A is. That's the missing side. We know that B is 125. We know that C is 315. We know that capital A is 62.5. That is the angle that corresponds with the missing side. That's how we know that's capital A. Okay, this is the cosine rule. It says A squared equals to B squared plus C squared minus 2 times B times C cosine of A. So let's substitute. We know that B is 125, so it's going to be 125 squared. We know that C is going to be equal to 315. That's 315 squared. We keep the 2, but we got to multiply B times C. B is 125. C is 315. Multiply that by cosine of the given angle, which is 62.5. Now we're going to calculate. We did this side. What we do is, in our calculator, we do 125 squared plus 315 squared, and that gives us 114,850 minus 78,750 cosine of 62.5. Now we subtract and we get this value, which is 78,487.29671. We have to take the square root of both sides because we want to get rid of this squared. So let's take the square root of both sides. The square root cancel with the square, so we're left with A is equal to the square root of this value. If we take the square root of this value, we get 280.1558436. We round to two decimal places, and we get 280.16. And that is how we find BC. So the missing side, BC, is going to be equal to 280.16. Now let's move on to the next question. They said that they want us to find out the area of this angle, of this triangle. So you want to find the area, okay, the area of this triangle. Like, what is the area of this triangle? In order to find the area of this triangle, we're going to use a formula, and the formula is half of AB, right? Half of AB sine C. So we're going to call this side A. We're going to call this side B, and we're going to call this angle C. And so the area is going to be half of AB sine C. All right. And so A is, what is A? A is 125. Okay. B is 315. Now, the reason why we know that this angle is C, that this is the angle we're supposed to use, is because according to the formula that we're using, C is going to be the angle that corresponds to small c. Okay, and small c is going to be any side that is not A and B. All right, once it's not A and B. So if we use 125 and 315, we cannot use this angle, and we cannot use this angle. We must use this angle, the angle whereby we do not have a side that is inside our formula. So that's how we find C. So C is the angle, and so A and B is the sides of our triangle. And so A is 125, B is 315, C is 62.5. We multiply 125 and 315, and we also have a half here that's also multiplied here. We have the find sine of 62.5. We know that a half is 0.5, so it's going to be 0.5 times 125 times 315. Also multiplied by sine of the given angle. And once we do that, we get this value, 17,463.025578. And when we round to 2 decimal places, and so the answer is going to be 17,463.03. And that's the, this is supposed to be 0.3 feet squared, okay, because it's area. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Here we have function. So here we have a function. It's f of x is equal to 7 minus 3x, and g of x is equal to x plus 5 divided by 2. And then we want to find the value of g of 11. Okay, we already know that g of x is going to be x plus 5 divided by 2. Wherever we see x, we're going to put 11. And so 11 here and 11 here. What is 11 plus 5? 11 plus 5 is 16. Divide 16 by 2, the answer is 8. So g of 11 is equal to 8. Let's move on to question 11b. Here we have f of x is equal to 7 minus 3x. And we want to find the value of x when f of x is equal to 9. So f of x is equal to 9. That's what we know. What is f of x? Well, f of x is 7 minus 3x. That's what we found. That's what we know from what was given. And we have to solve for x. So we're going to send this 7 over the equal sign. All right. It was a positive 7. So we're going to be a negative 7 when we send it over the equal sign. And then we do 9 minus 7. What is 9 minus 7? 9 minus 7 is 2. We divide both sides by negative 3. And we cancel the negative 3's. So we have that x is equal to negative 2 over 3. Now let's move on to question 11c. We want a simplified expression for g of f of x. So this is a composite function. We know that f of x is the baby function and g of x is the parent. So f is inside of g. And so again, f of x is the baby, g of x is the parent, f of x is inside of g. And so if we do this, we're going to say f of x plus 5, okay? And so what that's going to be equal to? That's going to be f of x is what? 7 minus 3x. That's what f of x is. So we substitute that. So 7 minus 3x plus 5 divided by 2. We can combine like terms because we have 7 and 5. So we put 7 plus 5 together and we put the negative 3x over here, divided all over 2. What is 7 plus 5? Well, 7 plus 5 is 12. And so g of f of x is going to be equal to negative 3x plus 12 divided by 2. And that's our answer. Okay, moving on, let's find the inverse. So we want to find out what is the inverse of f of x. So in order to find the inverse, the first thing you're going to do is write your function down. Set f of x equal to y, all right? And so you have y is equal to 7 minus 3x. Then we're going to swap. We're going to swap x for y. And so wherever x is, we put y. Wherever y is, we put x. So now we have x equal to 7 minus 3y. Again, when you're trying to find the inverse, you set f of x equal to y, and then you swap x and y. And now we're going to solve for y. So how are we going to solve for y? Well, we're going to send the 7 over the equal sign. It was positive 7, it becomes negative 7. And so we have negative 3y. We divide both sides by negative 3. And we could cancel this negative 3 with that negative 3, leaving us with y is equal to x minus 7 divided by negative 3. So y is equal to x minus 7 divided by negative 3. And so that means that f inverse is going to be equal to x minus 7 divided by negative 3. So again, f inverse is going to be x minus 7 divided by negative 3. Okay, let's move on to question number 12. Here we have a circle and we have the arc AB. We have a radius of 10 centimeters and we have an angle, right here, an angle. They say that that angle is what, 60 degrees. And so this angle right here measures what, 60 degrees, okay, based on the question. Okay, so they said that they want us to figure out the length of the minor arc. So basically they want the arc length. So if we're trying to find the arc length, the formula is theta over 360 multiplied by 2 times pi times r. That's the formula. And again, the formula for finding the arc length is going to be theta over 360 multiplied by 2 times pi times r, where theta is going to be this angle in the middle. Okay, so let's move on to our question. We know that we're going to use that formula for the arc length. What is pi though? Pi is 3.14, and we know that the angle inside is 60 degrees. So that means that theta is going to be 60 degrees because theta is the given angle. We know that r is 10 centimeters. That's given in the question. And we know that pi is equal to 3.14. So the arc length formula is theta over 360 multiplied by 2 times pi times r. We know that theta is 60. So we have 60 divided by 360. We know that pi is 3.14, and we know that r is 10. Now what we do is we put this over 1, put that over 1, and we can multiply. What is 2 times 3.14? Well, 2 times 3.14 is 6.28. And so we have 60 over 360 multiplied by 6.28 over 1 multiplied by 10 over 1. 60 times 6.28 times 10 is going to be 3,768 divided by 360, and we get 10.466666. And continuing, and so if we round that to the nearest, if we round it to 2 decimal places, we get 10.47. And so the arc length, correct, the 2 decimal places is 10.47 centimeters. Okay, let's move on to the next question. They say they want us to find the area of the shaded region. So they want us to find the area of this region right here. So that's area of a sector. The area of a sector is given by this formula. It's going to be theta over 360 multiplied by pi r squared. And so where theta is the given angle, r is the radius, and this is a sector. But if we want a full circle, area of a full circle, that's pi r squared, but we just want the area of a sector. So if you're trying to find the area of a sector, did we do that question? Okay, so let's do it. So area of a sector of a circle, let's go back to the question. We know that, let's do it here. We know that we found the formula. So the formula told us that it's going to be theta, okay, theta divided by 360. Again, theta divided by 360, okay, multiplied by pi r squared. Now, what is theta? Theta we know is the angle in the middle. That's going to be 60 degrees. That's this angle. We know from the question that's 60 degrees. So theta is 60 degrees. It's going to be 60 degrees divided by 360 multiplied by, what is pi? Pi is going to be 3.14. So we have 3.14 all over 1 and multiplied by what? R squared. What is R? R is 10. So that's the radius. So that's going to be 10 to the power of 2. So that's 10 squared all over 1. Okay, great. So let's multiply. We have 60. Again, we have 60 multiplied by 3.14 multiplied by 10 squared. We know 10 squared is just 100. And so that's going to be 18,000, right? 18,840. So that's 18,840 divided by 360 times 1 times 1, which is going to be 360. Okay, good. So what is 18,840 divided by 360? Well, the answer is going to be 52.3333333 and continuing, so it continues on and on and on. But if we want it to 2 decimal places, it's going to be 52.33. And this is going to be centimeters squared. And so that is correct to 2 decimal places. Okay, so the correct answer is 52.33, correct to 2 decimal places. Using what formula? Using this formula here. Theta over 360 multiplied by pi r squared. And that's what we did here. Theta over 360 multiplied by pi r squared. And that's how we got our number. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Here we have a cylindrical iron ruler. It has an external diameter of 150 centimeters and it's 5 centimeters thick. The length is 1.8 meters. So here we want to find the surface area of this. You have to find the surface area of the curved surface, right, in meters squared. So it's very important to remember that we have to find the surface area of the curved surface in meters squared. So pay attention to the units. That's very important. It has to be meters squared. So let's go to discover the formula for the surface area. So the surface area is the area of the surface of the cylinder. So we have here, if you look at the cylinder, we have a circle at the top. We have a circle at the bottom. We know that the area of the circle is pi r squared, but we have two circles. So we have this circle at the top, the circle at the bottom, and the circle on top. So because of that, when you look at the surface area of a cylinder, it's going to be 2 pi r squared because it's two circles that we have to take into account. So we have to find the area of this circle and the area of that circle and add them. So that's why it's 2 pi r squared. We also have to figure out the area of this rectangular portion that is wrapped around. We know that area of a rectangle is going to be length times width. And so we have h times 2 pi r. This is going to be this side. So we have to multiply these two sides, which is h times 2 pi r. And that's how we get the area of the rectangle. So this portion is the area of the circles. This portion is the area of the rectangle. We add them together to get the surface area of the cylinder. So let's move on to this question. So here we know that pi is 3.14. We also know that the radius, is going to be, this is rated as the diameter, but the radius is half of the diameter, so it's going to be 150 divided by 2, which is 75. but this is centimeters, so we have to convert that centimeters into meters. So it's going to be 0.75 meters for the radius. And the height is already given in meters, that's 1.8. Okay, now let's figure out the surface area of the cylinder. We know it's 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. We substitute our values. Pi is 3.14, r is 0.75 squared, and we have 2 times 3.14, which is pi, 0.75, which is the radius, and 1.8, which is h. And so if we multiply this section right here, we get 3.5325. And if we multiply this section right here, we get 8.478. And so adding them together, we get 12.0105 meters squared. And so that's the correct answer for the surface area of the cylinder. Now let's move on. They asked for the volume of the material used in making the roller in meters cube. So we want to figure out the, it says a cylindrical iron roller has an external diameter of 150 centimeters and it's 5 meters thick. So here we basically want to find the volume of this particular cylinder, right? The one in the middle, the one right here that has the, that has 5 centimeters thick in this curved portion, right? We want to find the volume of this, okay? That's what we want to find, this for the volume of this cylinder, the cylinder that is, if we look here, right? That portion, sorry, this portion here, okay? So to find the volume of that particular cylinder. So it's very important to note that the volume of a cylinder is pi r squared times h, where r is the radius and h is the height. Now, if we look at it, this is basically a cylinder within a cylinder, if we look at it. And so look carefully, we have 2 cylinders, okay? So we have a smaller cylinder, all right? And we have a bigger cylinder. If we look at this diagram, that's what's happening inside here. What we want is, we want this cylinder, the one in the middle, all right? So basically we want what's left, all right? So basically in order to do that, if we can take out, like if we could remove, right? So we want what's left. That's what I should say. We want what's left. All right. So if we could remove like this volume, like if we could take this volume out, all right, then we can get what's left. And that's what they're asking us for. Like if we could remove this volume, like if we could take it away from the volume of the bigger cylinder, because there's 2 cylinders, we have a bigger one and we have a smaller one. If we could pull out this volume, like if we could pull out the volume of this cylinder, then we'll be left with just the volume that we want, which is the volume of the material used in making the roller. Okay, so that's what we have to do. We have to take away the volume of the smaller cylinder from the volume of the bigger cylinder to get what's left. That's going to be the volume of the roller. That's going to be the volume of the material used in making the roller. So let's move on. So let's find the volume of the material used in making the roller. That's going to be the volume of the big cylinder minus the volume of the smaller cylinder. Because if we take the smaller cylinder out, then we'll get the volume of the material used in making the roller. So how do we find the volume of the big cylinder? Well, we know the volume is pi r squared times h. We know that for the big cylinder, r is going to be 150 divided by 2, which is going to be 75 centimeters, which is going to be 0.75 meters, because we're trying to find the volume of this big one. See, the big one has a diameter of 150, right? And this is the bigger one right here. That is trying to find the volume of the big one, the one on the outside. So we have to use this diameter because it's the volume of this big one that we're trying to find first. So, and when we use that diameter, we have to use that radius. So we have to do half of that diameter, which is 150. And so that's erase that. So that means that r is going to be equal to 0.75 meters. The height is still going to be 1.8. And so the answer is 3.17925 meters cubed. Now we want the volume of the smaller cylinder. Pi is going to remain the same, but the radius is not the same. We want the volume of this particular cylinder, this one. There's a smaller one. So we're using this smaller circle right there. What is the diameter of the smaller circle? The diameter of the smaller circle is not going to be 150. It's going to be 140. Okay. How do I know it's going to be 140? Because I know that this side is 5, and I know that this side is 5. So add 5 and 5, that's 10. So if I want to find the diameter of this particular circle, it's going to be 140. How do I get that? I add 5 and 5 because that's the thickness of the one that's around. So 5 and 5, and it's going to be 10, and I subtract 10 from 150. So the radius of the smaller cylinder is going to be 150 minus 10, which is going to be 140 divided by, so we have 150 divided, so the radius, sorry, of the smaller one is going to be 150 minus 10 divided by 2. 150 minus 10 is going to be 140 divided by 2 is going to be 70. Okay, so we're doing half of 140, which is 70. And so that means that the radius here is 70 centimeters. But we know if we divide it by, if we convert it to meters, it's going to be 0.7. So the radius is 0.7. We square that, multiply that by 1.5. And so here the volume is going to be 2.76948 meters cubed. Now, in order to find the volume of the material used in making the roller, we subtract the volume of the big cylinder minus the volume of the smaller cylinder, and we get 0.409770 meters cubed. And that's going to be our answer. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 13A. Here we have this fraction, and we want to write it. Here we have this these two fractions subtracted by each other, and we want to write that fraction in simplest terms. So what we're going to do here is we're going to first find the LCM of 6 and 5. What is the LCM of 6 and 5? Well, the multiples of 5, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30. So that means that the LCM of 5 and 6 is 30. So we have to make the denominators both the same as the LCM. So what times 6 is 5? Sorry, what times 6 is 30? Well, 5 times 6 is 30. Whatever we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. So we multiply 5 by m. Now, what times 5 is 30? Well, 5 times 6 is 30. So whatever we do to the bottom, we must do to the top. So we multiply 6 by the top as well. So 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 6 is 30. So we have the same denominator. 5 times m is 5m. And 6 times 2 minus m is 6 times 2 minus m, like that. We can combine the two fractions, and we can multiply 6 by 2 and multiply, it's actually negative 6. Negative 6 by 2 and negative 6 by negative m. So what is negative 6 multiplied by 2? That's going to be negative 12. And negative 6 multiplied by negative m is going to be positive 6m, because a negative and a negative is positive. We group the like terms, 6m plus 5m. Sorry, 5m plus 6m, and we add them. So we get 11m minus 12 divided by 30. And so that's how we write those particular entities as a single fraction. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Here we have this one is addition 1, and we have to write it as a single fraction in simplest form. Okay, so here what we have to do is we have to make sure that we have the same denominator. And so in order for us to combine the fractions, we have to have the same denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by n. Whenever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So multiply that top by n. I'm going to multiply this by 3 minus n. Multiply this by 3 minus n. So the denominators could be the same. So n times 3 minus n is going to be n times 3 minus n. And n times 3 minus n is going to be n times 3 minus n. So they have the same denominator. N times 2 is going to be 2n. And 7 times 3 minus n is going to be 7 times 3 minus n. We can combine them because they have the same denominator and write it as one fraction. Now we do 7 times 3. What is 7 times 3? That's going to be 21. And 7 times n is going to be 7n. So we have 21 minus 7n. So we have 2n plus 21 minus 7n. We group the like terms together. 2n minus 7n is going to be negative 5n plus 21 divided by n, open bracket, 3 minus n. That's the answer to this question. Moving right along, we have this one here. This is the division. And so what we're going to do for the division is we're going to change the division sign into a multiplication sign. And we're going to switch. We're going to swap these two. Okay, that's the rule. So 18p squared divided by q to the third power multiplied by q divided by 10p squared. So we could do here is we could cancel out these two terms, p squared and p squared. That leave us with just 10 at the bottom and 18 at the top. We can also cancel the this q with q to the third power. And so what happens is you have q at the bottom. So let's make this right. What happens is you have let me get this right. So you have q at the bottom, and you have sorry, q at the top, sorry. And you have q times, because this is q to the third power. So it's q times, let me get this right, q times q times q. So we have 3 q's at the bottom and we have 1 q at the top. We can cancel out this q with that q, okay? And so we are left with q squared, all right? So at the bottom here, we have q squared because we took away 1 q from the 3. And so we have 18 over q squared times 1 over 10. We multiply 18 times 1, which gives us 18, and we multiply 10 times q squared, which is still 10q squared. We divide top and bottom by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the answer is 9 divided by 5q squared. Moving right along, we have we have the next one, which is factorization. Here, we're going to do factorization by grouping. Notice we're going to do this side, and then we're going to do that side. For the side, we could factor out a y, because if we do y times x, that's xy. And if we do y times 3, that's 3y. Here, we can factor out a 2, so we have negative 2 times x, which is negative 2x, and negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. And so we could factor out the 2 here and the y here. Notice that these two are the same. We have x plus 3 and x plus 3. So let's factor that out. So if we factor that out, we just have x plus 3. And what's left? We have y minus 2. And so that's what's left, y minus 2. And so the answer is x plus 3 times y minus 2. So what's left? Y and minus 2. I hope I didn't say plus 2. But we have y and minus 2 left. And so we put y minus 2 right here. So the answer is x plus 3 multiplied by y minus 2. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have a graph question. It says, using a scale of 1 centimeter to represent 1 unit on each axis, draw the x and y axis. We're going to go from negative 6 to 10 on the x-axis, and we're going to go from negative 6 to 10 on the y-axis. So let's graph it. So here we look, we go from negative 6 to 10 on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, we go from negative 6 to 10. We have 1 centimeter to 1 unit, so that means we count in ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. So each block is 1 unit. Okay, what did they say? They say draw and label triangle LMN with the coordinates L is 2 and negative 1, M is 3 and M is 3, 1, and N is 4 and negative 2. So here we have here L is 2 and negative 1, M is 3 and 1, and N is 4 and negative 2. We can combine them, and that is our triangle. Now, let's move on to the next question. It says, triangle LMN is translated by the vector negative 2, 7. Draw and label it triangle L1, M1, and N1. So we're using this vector to do the translation. So remember our coordinates, L is 2, -1, M is 3, 1, and N is 4 and -2. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this vector to add it to this particular coordinate. We know that 2 plus -2 is 0. We know that -1 plus 7 is 6. Move right along. We have 3, 1. We have to add it to -2 and 7. That's the vector. 3 plus -2 is 1. And 1 plus 7 is 8. And for end 1, we have 4 plus -2. That's going to be 2. And -2 plus 7 is going to be 5. And so the coordinates of our new triangle, our pre-image, is going to be 0, 6, 1, 8, and 2, 5. And so let's do that. So again, the coordinates is going to be 0, 6. That's going to be L1. Then we're going to have 1, 8. That's going to be M1. And then we're going to have 2, 5. That's going to be N1. We combine them together, and that's the translation. We moved this to here using the translation of -2, 7. Let's move on to question D. It says, the last one we did was C. So now we're going to move on to D. So D says, MN triangle LMN is rotated 90 degrees clockwise about the origin. Draw and label it triangle L2, M2, and N2. So here what we have here, this is a table or a chart showing us the different types of rotation and the point in the pre-image and the point after rotation. So if we have a rotation of 90 degrees clockwise, that means we're using this one, which means that if your point on your pre-image, which is the original image, is X, Y, what you're going to do is you're going to switch X and Y. So you're going to swap them, switch X and Y, and then you're going to negate the X. So again, switch X and Y, and then negate the X. And so that's what we're going to do here to do a 90 degree clockwise rotation. So L, remember L is 2, 1. But remember what we have to do? Switch X and Y, and then negate X. So again, we switch X and Y. So X is going to be here, Y is going to be there. And so what we do is then we what? Negate X. And so it's going to be -2. All right. So again, what do we do? Remember we had X. So we had X. Let me make it clear for you. So we had let's use a pen. So we had, remember we had let me erase that. So we had 2, X is 2, Y is what? -1. What does the rule tell us? The rule tell us that you swap X and Y. That's the first thing that you do. Swap X and Y, because you notice we have X here, Y here, and X here. So we swap X and Y. That's the first thing we do. So it's going to be -1 and 2. So we swap X and Y. And then what do we do with the X value? Right? What do we do with this value here? Well, we negate it. Okay, so the X value, which is 2, right? So we negate that. That's going to be -2 now. So it's going to be -2. And we don't change the Y value, so it's just going to be -1. And so our value that we have now is -1, -2. So in each case, we're going to negate the X that we swapped over. So let's look at this one, 3, 1. Again, you switch over and you negate the X. So switch, if you switch, it's going to be 1, 3, and then you negate the X value. So it's going to be -3. And for this one, again, switch, it's going to be -2 and 4, but then remember we negate 4, so it's going to be -4. And so what that means is the coordinates for L2, M2, and N2 are the following. It's going to be -1, -2. It's going to be 1 and -3, and it's going to be -2 and -4. So let's do that. So again, for L2 is going to be -1, -2. For M2, it's going to be 1 and -3. And for N2, it's going to be -2, -4. We combine them, and that's what our values are. Now let's move on to the next question. It says triangle LMN is enlarged by scale factor of 2, and the center of our enlargement is 0, -1. So we have to draw and label it triangle L3, M3, and N3. So for this one, what we have to do is we have to first identify 0, -1. This right here, this dot, this point is our that is our center of enlargement. That's going to be our center right here. So this is L. So if you look carefully, right, we moved how much spaces? 1, 2 spaces. And so that means if we're moving by a scale factor of 2, all right? So let's go back. This is a new image, but this is how we do it. Remember, if you look carefully from your graph, you see that for L, we move 2 spaces to get to the scale factor, to get to the center. And so if we wanna enlarge it by 2, we have to multiply 2 by 2, which is gonna give us 4. So that means that our new distance is gonna be 4 units away from, it's gonna be 4 units away from the center. So again, we were 2 units away from the center. Once we use the scale factor times it by 2, we're gonna end up being 4 units away. And so what that means is that if we look carefully, here, we see that, let's go back. If we look carefully here, we see that, again, it was 1, 2 units away. And so that means that L3 is going to be what? 1, 2, 3, 4 units away. And that's why L3 is 4 units away from the center of enlargement. Now let's look at M3. Now if we look at M3, let me erase all ink from the slide. Let's erase all ink from the slide. I don't want this here. So if we look at, let's look now at M3. So if we look at M3 and related to our center, we find that this is 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I'm sorry. If we look at M, not M3. If we look at M, not M3. So let's look at M, and that's related to our scale factor. No, our center of enlargement. So let's look at M. So M is going to be 1, 2, 3 spaces away, and it's going to be 1, 2 units away from the center. So M is 1, 2, 3 units away going horizontal, and 1, 2 units away going vertical. So what that means is, if we look at M is 3 units away horizontally, and it's 2 units away vertically. So if we multiply it by our scale factor, we find that it's going to be 2 times 2, which is 4 units vertical, and it's going to be 3 times 2, which is 6 units vertical. So it's going to be 6, 4. That's where we're going to have to move it 6 units across and 4 units above. And so let's do that. So again, it is 1, 2, 3 units across and 1, 2 units above. So in order to get our M3, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. Okay, and how much units above? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's why M3 is right here. Okay, similarly, let's look at N. So if we look at N, we find that, let me discard all this ink. If we look at N, we find that N, let's look at N with respect to our center. So if we look at n, we find that n is 1, 2, 3, 4 units away horizontally, and it's going to be 1 unit away vertically. So it's going to be, again, 1, 2, 3, 4 units, and it's going to be 1 unit away. That's where n is. So that means that if we go here, we find that, again, n is 4 units away across and 1 unit away going down. And so that means we multiply by a scale factor. We have 4 times 2, which is going to be 8, okay? And 1 times 2, which is going to be 2. And so it's going to be 8 units across and 2 units down. And so what that means is, that means that N3 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2 units down, 1, 2. And that's why N3 is right there. And so that is how we enlarge this image using the scale factor of 2 and using the center of origin, the center of enlargement as 0, -1. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Here we have, okay, good. Here we have f. It says that f is reflected in the line y is equal to x plus 1. And we want to draw and label it triangle L4, M4, and N4. So here, this is the line y is equal to x plus 1, which means that our slope is 1 and our y-intercept is 1. So slope is 1, which means it's going to be 1 divided by 1, rise over run. So our rise is going to be 1 and our run is going to be 1. But our y-intercept is 0. So that means that we're going to start, sorry, our y-intercept is 1, not 0. So that means we're going to start on our y-axis at the y-intercept, which is 1. So our first point is going to be, let me redraw everything. But let's go, our first point for this line is going to be at 1 because that's the y-intercept right there. So we're going to put 1 right there. And our next point, remember we go up 1 and we go across 1 because rise is 1 and run is 1. So again, it's going to be 1 and 1. So you're starting from the y-intercept, which is 1. You go up 1, 1, and then you go across 1, 1. And so that's going to be, the next point is going to be right here. And so the line that goes to those 2 points is going to be this line. And that is the line, okay, that is the line y is equal to x plus 1. It has a slope of 1 and it has a y-intercept of 1. Okay, so we have to reflect this triangle in this line. So let's do that. So if we're looking at the reflection in the line y is equal to x plus 1, we're looking at that reflection. The point for our pre-image is xy, but our point on our image is going to be y minus 1, x plus 1. You ask, how did we get that? Well, if it was x plus 2, it's going to be y minus 2x plus 2. If it was x plus 3, it's going to be y minus 3, x plus 3. And if it was y is equal to x plus 4, it's going to be y minus 4, x plus 4. So that's the pattern. So we know that what this is telling us is that take your y value and subtract it by 1. Take your x value, subtract and add it by 1. So for L, we have 2. So what is this telling us? They told us to do what? They said, okay, if you want to figure out the reflection in the line y is equal to x plus 1, you have to take your x value and add it by 1. Take your y value and subtract it by 1. So what is 2 plus 1? 2 plus 1, if you had a plus 1, that's good. 2 plus 1 is going to be 3. And what is -1 minus 1? Well, -1 minus 1 is -2. So take your x value, add it by 1, take your y value, subtract it by 1. Let's do a next one. So we have 3, 1. Take your x value and add 1 to it. Okay, that's going to give us 4 on this side. Take your y value and subtract 1. 1 minus 1 is going to be 0. And finally, n, we have 4 and minus 2. Take your x value and add 1. So it's 4 plus 1, which is going to be 5. And take your y value and subtract 1. That's going to be -2 and -1, which is going to be -3. And so those are the points of on our image for L4, M4, and N4. So let's plot it. And we still have the line y is equal to x plus 1. L4 is going to be -2 and 3. And then we have M4. M4 is going to be at 0, 4. Then we have N4, which is going to be at -3 and 5. We combine all the points. And so this is the reflection right here. So this right here is reflection in the line y is equal to x plus 1. Remember, we have to label this y is equal to x plus 1. All right, let's move on to the next question. Here we have this Venn diagram. It says, at the university this semester, there are 105 students in the biology chemistry program. The Venn diagram shows 3 courses. The students may register 4. The number of students taking all 3 courses is denoted by X. 50 take the chemistry course. All chemistry students are also mathematics students. 64 take biology. 16 take maths only. 9 take mathematics and biology only. And 5 take none of these 3. Copy and complete the Venn diagram in terms of X where applicable. So we know that 5 take none of the 3. So that means that 5 is going to be on the outside. We also know that 9 take math and bio only. So math and bio only is going to be right here. So 9 goes right there. We know that 16 take math only. So that 16 is going to be on that side. We know that 64 take biology. So 64 take biology. So that means that if we look carefully, biology is this entire circle, right? So this entire circle is biology, the whole thing. Okay, the whole thing is biology. So if 64 in total take biology, if we want to figure what this side is, we got to subtract these 2 from that. So 64 minus 9 plus x is going to be this one. Let me explain that again. So we erase everything. So again, this whole thing right here, the whole thing, that's 64. All right, all of that is 64. Okay, the whole circle. We already know that this portion of the circle is x. We already know that this portion of the circle is 9. Okay, so if you want to figure out what is this portion, it's going to be 64 minus 9 plus x. And that's how we get the 64 minus 9 plus x. Okay, so let's erase that. Next, we have, we know that 50 take chemistry. Okay, so 50 take chemistry. What does that mean? That means that all of this right there, all of this take chemistry. The whole C, all of that take chemistry. Okay. We already know that this part is X. Okay. So if we want to figure out what this part is, that's going to be 50 minus X. And so we have completed the diagram in terms of X. Okay. And so 5 on this side, 16, 50 minus X, X, 9, and 64 minus 9 plus X. Now what they want us to do is they want us to write an equation in terms of X and solve it. We know that 64 minus 9 plus x plus 9 plus x plus 50 minus x plus 16 plus 5, all of that equals to 105. The reason why we know it's 105 because that's how much students that are there. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply -1 by 9 and -1 by x, which is going to be equal to -9 minus x. Next, we collect like terms. Only the numbers we're concerned about. So 64, -9, +9, 50, 16, and 5. Those are the ones that we're interested in on this side. And on this side, we're only concerned about the x. So negative x, positive x, negative x. That's what we're concerned about. Okay, now let's add up all of the numbers. If we add up all the numbers, 64 minus 9 plus 9 plus 50 plus 16 plus 5, that's going to be 135. And let's do the x. Negative x plus x, well, those two cancel each other. So we just left with 135 minus x equals to 105. We send the 135 over the equal sign, so we left with negative x equals to 105 minus 135. We subtract and we are left with negative 30. So negative x equals to negative 30. Divide both sides by negative 1. We cancel, so x is going to be equal to negative 30 divided by negative 1, which is equal to 30. So x is equal to 30. Now let's move on to the next question. It says calculate the value of n, the number of elements in M intersect B. Now what is M intersect B? That's math intersect biology. What is that? That is this. So we have, this is where biology and math intersect, right? So math is this big one and biology is this one right here. Where do they intersect? They intersect right there in this yellow portion. And so that's going to be n, the number of elements in M intersect B is going to be 9 plus x. These two together. What is x? We just saw that x is 30. So 9 plus 30 is going to be 39. Next, we have the next question. It says, calculate the value of the number of elements in C complement. Well, C complement is everything except for C. Everything except for C. So it's going to be 64 minus 9 plus x, 9, 16, and 5. Everything except for this one that is unshaded. So n complement is going to be 64 minus 9 plus x plus 9 plus 16 plus 5. We know that x is 30. Plug that in. So it's going to be 39 minus, we're going to take away 39 from 64. We're going to add 9 again, add 16 and add 5. And so the answer here is 55. So the number of elements in C complement is going to be 55. Now let's move on to question this one. It says, calculate the number of students who take one of the courses only. So you're either going to take math only. We know math only is 16. Or you're going to take biology only. Biology only is this portion right here, which is 64 minus 9 plus x. We know that x is 30. So it's going to be 64 minus 39. What is 64 minus 39? So 64 minus 39, that's going to be 25. So biology only is 25. Now chemistry only, there's no such thing as, there are no persons who does chemistry only, because if you're doing chemistry, you are also doing math. So chemistry only is 0. And so we add 16, that's math only plus biology only, and we get 41. So 16 plus 25 is 41. Now let's move on to the next one. Here we want number of students who are taking 2 of the courses only. So you're either going to be taking math and biology only, and if you're taking math and biology only, that's 9. Or you're taking math and chemistry only, and math and chemistry only is this one. All right, that's going to be 50 minus x. X is 30, so it's going to be 50 minus 30, which is 20. And so, or you can be taking biology and chemistry only, but you can't take biology, and chemistry only, because if you're taking chemistry, you are also taking math. So you can't just take math and biology only. So that's 0. So if we were to add it, we have math and bio only, that's 9. Math and chemistry only, that's 20. So the answer is 29. Okay, so next up we want the number of students who take at least 2 of these courses. Okay, so at least 2 of the courses is going to be, that means that you take 2 courses only. So at least 2 means that you take 2 courses or 3 courses. So how many students took 2 courses? That's going to be 29. We saw that earlier. And how many students took 3 courses? Well, that's going to be x. So that's 30. So 2 courses plus 3 courses is going to be 29 plus 30, which is going to be 59. And so the correct answer here is 59. And so that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you find this video to be helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.